thank you very much, boss. I hand over the mic to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Manuel. Can you confirm you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. Thank you so
Yes,
much,
I can.
everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining to this session. It's actually a pleasure to be here again after a long time. I think I was here last I think October or November before I started my vacation in December. So I decided to pick up on this particular session again. And it has actually been an amazing journey. I've been following up on the sessions, I've been watching the recording, and I really want to appreciate everyone that joined those sessions. And I believe we've not actually wasted your time with this particular bootcamp, because for everyone that like we collaborated with all our mentors, the amazing peoples, to spend their time to sacrifice their time to actually impart us. It's not easy. Even for me being here, it was earlier this week I realized that I'm taking the session. I was super busy all through the week. It was this morning I had to say, okay, now let me just put together my PowerPoint presentation for the session and prepare towards the session. So thank you everyone for joining. It's a pleasure having everyone once again. I think on this call we are about 13 on the call so far. Yeah, thank you, AGK, and thank you. How is Highland today? Hope it's not too cold for you. Mota is a bit cold for me this morning. It's actually raining at the moment, so it's actually very cold. All right, awesome. So let's jump into the session properly. So we have a lot to cover basically. So let me introduce myself again for those that don't know me. My name is Emmanuel Itoje. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer, a Microsoft certified educator, as well as a technical architect. I specialize in Microsoft 365, Azure AI, as well as cloud security. I'm one of the co-lead, like Emmanuel mentioned, of this particular community that is organizing this four months boot camp and mentorship. I mean, I think we're going to end it maybe 3 more classes for us we have before the end of the sports camp. But again, our approach, most of you must have seen this before. We want all our sessions to be interactive. We want it to be engaging, meaning that we believe in creating a dynamic learning environment where everyone feels welcome, and we value open communication here. So we want you to ask your questions, we want to interact better. Then there's always the floor is always open for question and answers and feedback. If there are things that you feel that you can do better, we encourage you to ask those questions and drop those feedback for us. And the goal is to empower everyone, to achieve one. That is actually Microsoft vision. Empower everyone and every organization, to achieve one. And this is one of the reasons why we're putting together this training. And I mentioned no spoon feeding, meaning that you'll be given all the information you need, but we encourage you to also do your own research. And when in the process of doing your research, if you have questions, you're free to ask your question. I'll be turning off my video for now so that we can focus on the slide. All right. So today, what are we looking at today? We're looking at one of our topics that says plan and implement privilege access. Plan and implement privilege access. Now, when you talk about privilege access, we are looking at what are some important, solutions, resources that you have. The goal at the end of the day is to ensure that administrative roles are protected and managed to increase your Azure solution security, and want to explore what we call PIM, PIM. We're going to look at it in details, privilege and identity management. That is actually the focus of today. So basically increasing our Azure solution security by ensuring that administrative roles are protected and managed is as required. I want to explore PIM itself, looking at what are the strategy, that we can use as an organization to, configure PIM, assign PIM role, what are the important things that we need. as part of our privilege identity management. So for our agenda today, we're going to define what a privilege access strategy for administrative users are. Talking about what is PIM itself, what are the important requirements of PIM. There'll be a lot of demo today because PIM is all about you seeing it, you learn more. So there'll be a demo on how to configure PIM for identity management. There'll be demo to configure PIM for Azure resources, how to assign roles, as well as how to manage PIM requests. Then we'll look at another demo on how to analyze PIM audit histories as well as reports. Then lastly, we'll be looking at emergency access account. What is an emergency access account? Then the floor will be open for the question and answer. So the first thing you're looking at, what is PIM? Has anyone heard about PIM? If you've heard about PIM, can you drop in the chat if you've heard about what the PIM is? Privilege Identity Management. Let me know how many people. Okay, yeah, Chroma, I see you know about PIM. Okay, can you just in the chat also tell me what you know what PIM is? If you can tell me what you know that PIM is, right, Lavina? Okay, on here. And just tell us what PIM is, what you understand by PIM. Managing privilege access securely. Thank you. Yes, I need some more response from those that responded that they understand, they've heard of the word PIM. Okay. All right. So I'll be looking at the chart later. So when we talk about PIM, PIM simply means is actually a service in the Microsoft Entra ID for managing access to privileged resources. And in other words, PIMS enables you to manage and control and also monitor access to important resources in your organization. So when you talk about those important resources, you're talking about resources like your Microsoft Entra ID itself, your Azure resources, then other Microsoft online services such as your Microsoft 365, as well as Microsoft Intune. So PIM actually helps us to manage access to these resources. So why is that really, really important? Before we look at that, what does PIM actually do? So PIM itself as a service provides what we call a time-based and an approval-based role activation to access resources, meaning that the goal at the end of the day, when Microsoft is putting together this solution, they are saying that they want to mitigate the risk of excessive as well as unnecessary or misuse access permissions on resources that you care about. So you have important resources in your organization, and a lot of people, they have access to these resources, which is not supposed to be. So you want to provide a time-based and approval-based activation to those resources. You don't just want people to just, have access to resource anyhow. You want it to be that they will have access to the resource in a particular time period. And also, if they're going to activate a privilege role to access these resources, they need to ensure that there is either an approval for them as they activate these roles. So we're going to see them in more details as we go into the demonstration. So what are the key features of PIMS? The first one is that it provides just-in-time privileged access to Microsoft Entra ID and Azure resources. Just in time is what I said earlier, meaning that if I need to just access this role or this Azure resources for 3 hours, then I will activate my access to that role or to that resources for that 3 hours, meaning that after 3 hours of activation, automatically the access to that resources will be removed or will be revoked. So if I still need to have access to that particular resources, it means that I need to go back again to activate the role. They use the word elevation for the role. So that is one of the key features of PIM. Another features is that it assigns a time-bound access to resources using the start and the end date. What does this mean? It means that, let me give you a typical scenario. a senior system admin, right, is going on a leave. And there are some tasks that the senior system admin usually used to do that the junior system admin in the organization, cannot do because of the role. So let's say the senior system admin is going on leave for 2 weeks, and they don't want it to be that there will be backlog of tasks that it's supposed to do, meaning that a junior admin could actually do those tasks, but the junior admin does not have the role, like a backup. So before going, it can create a pin, right, for that particular junior resource that, okay, for the next 2 weeks that I'll be away on vacation, you can activate this role and perform those tasks that those role can do, as though I'm the one doing those tasks. Meaning that after that 2 weeks, once the senior system admin is back, the guy the guy will not be able to activate that role again because already a start date and an end date has already been created. As a result of that, the junior system admin will not be able to activate that role again. So that's another feature that Team provides. The third one is that it requires approval to activate privilege roles. So some privilege roles like let's say the global admin, the security admin, right? Those privilege roles require that if at all a user is going to activate those roles, then another person will need to approve it to be sure that, okay, truly this guy is trying to activate this role, not that the guy's account is compromised and another person is trying to activate the role. Because at the end of the day, one important thing about the scheme is that even if that account is compromised, a bad actor was able to, get into that account, and the bad actor wants to wreak havoc in the tenant. But because an approval process needs to happen, we can stop that, we can mitigate that risk, meaning that another global admin that need to approve, we need to confirm with another ways to the other person. Okay, I notice that you're trying to activate this particular role. So what's up? Are you the person trying to do it? So the person will be able to confirm. So that's in that case, you've actually mitigated that particular risk of another bad actors gaining access to a super admin role for the tenants. Another feature is that it enforces Azure MFA multi-factor authentication to activate any roles. So provided you're activating a privilege role, an admin role, then you must use a Microsoft multi-factor authentication, meaning that unless the user use either the authenticator app or any method that the user has configured that they would like to use, to authenticate. Without that, then the user will not be able to do that role. And PIN is going to actually stop that because it is enforcing the multi-factor authentication at that point in time. Then there is another feature. You use justification to understand why users activate the role. So at the point of activation, we're going to see this in demo. The user need to write a justification. Okay, the reason why I want to activate this role is that a new joiner is joining the organization. So I'm activating the user admin role to, create the user accounts and do every other thing that I need to do as a user administrator or a helpdesk administrator. So that justification will help with auditing. So at the point they're going to check, okay, this role was activated today by 3 p.m. What was the justification that the person that was activating the role provided? So they were able to see it for auditing and monitoring. Another feature is that it helps to get notification when privilege roles are activated. So when a user is when you're a global admin or a security admin of a tenant or a privilege role administrator of a tenant, when any other privilege role is activated, you're going to receive an email notification that, oh, this person has just activated this role. Then you're able to monitor. So if I told the person, maybe the person is not supposed to use that role at that point in time, maybe the account is compromised, you'll be able to mitigate that particular risk. Then you can also conduct what we call access reviews to ensure that users still need that role. So with the head of the PIM, you're able to check, okay, these are the roles that have been assigned to those users to use for this period of time. Does this user still need access to this particular role? If the user does not need the access, then the user can be removed. The user's access can actually, the role can actually be removed as part of the eligible roles for the user. Then, lastly, you can actually download audit history for both internal and external audits. So in a scenario whereby you're performing an internal audit, especially if you're working in a highly regulated environment, that the auditors, they will like to see, okay, which roles are actively being used, let's say for the past 3 months. Okay, what are the justifications that were provided for those roles, right? So if there's going to be an auditing that will take place, with the help of PIN, you'll be able to download all the audit histories. So you can provide for your internal audit team or your external audit team. So these are the key features of Microsoft PIN, Privileged Identity Management System. Now, let's move forward. What are some of the important requirements for PIN? What are the things that you need to actually, put in place to be able to use PIN? Now, it is very important to understand that only owners of subscriptions and management group can bring resources under the management of a PIN. So either you are owner of a subscriptions or the management group before you can be able to bring that particular resource under PIN. And after it is under management, the PIN functionality is available for users who are actually owners at all levels, including the management group. So either you are owner at management group level, or you are owner at subscription level for an Azure, or you're an owner of a resource group, or you're an owner of a resource itself. So one of the important requirements is that before you can use PIN at all, before you can see the functionality, you can use the functionality of PIN, you need to have the Microsoft Entra ID P2 license. You must have the Microsoft Entra P2 license. So meaning that if you want to, do a practice, do a lab on your own to practice everything you're going to demo today, it means you have to go into your tenants and activate this trial. Without this trial, you'll not be able to, activate team. And this particular license, the Entra ID P2 license, is part of the Microsoft 365 E5 license. So if you also activate the Microsoft 365 E5 license, the Microsoft Entra ID Premium Prime 2 is part of the license. It's part of the license that is part of the license that will be given to you as part of that license. Then global admin and privileged role administrator can set up PIN for your Microsoft Entra tenant. So a user admin cannot set up PIN. Even a security administrator cannot set up PIN. Either a global admin or a privileged role administrator can set up PIN for your tenant. Then also for Azure resources under PIN, you must either be a owner or user access management. So there are two things PIM is doing for us now: the Microsoft Entra ID tenant, as well as the Azure resources. So there's a PIM for Entra ID and there's a PIM for Azure resources. So for Azure resources roles under PIM, so either you are owner or you are a user access administrator. Then another important requirement is that you must have enforced the principle of least privilege in your organization, not just for your Entra ID, also for your Azure roles as well. So you must have actually enforced the principle of least privilege. So that is actually very important. So these four things are really, really important if you're going to, be using PIN. So again, if you're a global admin trying to deploy PIN for your Azure resources, what you can do is that you can elevate your access to manage all the Azure subscriptions by giving yourself access to all the Azure resources in the directory, which a global admin can do. However, it is important that you get an approval from each of your subscription owner before managing their resources with PIM. I remember in my previous organization that I work with, right? As a system administrator, I was responsible for our M365, our Azure, our AWS, and our on-prem. Now, I was not responsible for deploying resources on this platform. So the compute and storage team, they will deploy the VM, the storage, whatever the developers, the devs, whatever they want. But as a global admin on the tenant, before assigning those resources to PIM, I need to work with the resource owner, either the subscription owner or the resource owner, to let them understand that, okay, this particular resource is a critical resource, and we need to manage this particular resource using PIM. So I'm to provide guidance to the resource owner that, okay, this your resource is very important for our organization, especially all these customer-facing applications, right? So working with them, meaning that it is very easy for me to say, okay, this particular resource, I'll put in the table, okay, all these resources are very important for us, and they are going under PIM, and we'll agree on it, basically. Now, one of the things that we need to do, I mentioned earlier, is to plan a least privilege delegation. Now, for Microsoft Entra role, it is common for organization, to assign the global admin role to a number of administrators, when most of the administrators only need maybe one or two, specific or a less powerful administrator's role. I've worked with an organization that they have over 10, about 15 global admins. I was like, what are all these people doing with this global admin? They don't need global admin. What is the role? So I needed to make them understand that, okay, what is this person doing? What does this person need to do? Okay, this person is only managing this resource. Okay, least privilege. You give the person, this is the role that the person will need, instead of giving the person that global admin role. Because with a large number of global administrator or other higher privilege role, it is actually very hard to track your privilege role assignments resources closely enough. It is very difficult. So you don't give everybody in the organization, a global admin role. Not even everybody in the sysadmin team. Someone that is doing just an IT support. Maybe the only thing the person needs to do is to reset password. Such a person just gave the person the password reset role. Instead of giving the person a global admin role, you don't even need to give the person the user administrator role, because the only job the person will be doing is to reset the password. So you must understand the granularity of the roles by reading and understanding all the available Microsoft Entra administrator role. So as an administrator, as an identity and access administrator for your organization, you need to understand, okay, what are the rules? You need to read it. That is needed. You must understand, okay, a user administrator role, these are the permission that this person have. Compliance administrator role, these are the permission the person needs. So then you'll be able to know, okay, in Entra ID, there is no permission for this, but I can create a custom role to fit into that permissions. So you must understand that. Then secondly, you must list those who have privileged role in your organization. And there's a solution that Microsoft has recently released, it's actually in preview, the PIM Discovery and Insights. You can use it to actually reduce your exposure as an organization. You can use it to reduce your exposure. And for all global administrators in your organization, find out why do they need this role. It's very important. I'm telling you all this because these are things I've seen live in different tenant organizations I've worked with. You have to find out, why do they need this role? Is it important for them to have this role? Can they be assigned other role such a way that it will not stop? They will still be productive. It will not affect their productivity. And for all other Microsoft Entra role, review the list of all the assignments and you identify the administrators who no longer need the role and you remove them from those assignments. So it's very important. Some people don't need the role. So why are we giving them that role? That means we are exposing the organization, we are exposing the tenant. That's what it means. Meaning that if that account, that user account is compromised, what is going to happen is that the bad actor that compromise the account can wreak havoc in your tenants. But if users don't have any role, they are just ordinary user without any admin privilege at all. Even if their account is compromised, the only thing that is compromised is the data or the resources that they have, maybe the access that they have to their maybe emails, their SharePoint, their Teams, right? That is all be compromised. But the tenant itself, the organization itself will not be compromised. So it's very important. And this last two, actually, you can actually automate this one and this one by using what we call access review in PIM. I think as part of our identity governance class, access review was mentioned. And you can also set up access review for every Microsoft Entra ID role that has one or more members. You can do that for your organization. That's for Entra. Now, for Azure resources, what is the difference? Now, for Azure subscriptions, basically, and resources, you can set up a similar access review process to review the rules in each subscriptions and resources. Meaning that the goal of this process is to minimize who are the owners and who are the people that have users access administrator assignments attached to each subscriptions or resources. And you remove every unnecessary assignment. However, what organizations do is that organizations often delegate such tasks to the owners of each resources or the subscriptions because the owners, they have a better understanding of the specific role that has been assigned, especially the custom role. And if you are a global admin of the organization, right, as a global admin role, you are trying to deploy PIM for the Azure resource in your organization. What you can do is that you can actually elevate your access to manage all the Azure subscriptions that you have in the tenant, and you get access to each of the subscription. And you can then find each subscription owner. After looking for them, you work with them to remove any unnecessary assignments and minimize owner roles assignments. I remember I was on a project, and on the project, I could see a lot of subscriptions, a lot of owners on subscriptions. I was like, and the Microsoft Defender for Cloud flagged it, the vulnerability assessment, that this particular resource or this particular subscription has over 100 owners. Why do they need access as an ownership of the subscription? Because owner in Azure like have the highest resource. As an owner of a subscription, you can decide to do anything to that subscription. You can remove other people access to that subscription. It's just like global admin, but for a Microsoft subscription. So users with owner's role for an Azure subscription can also use an access review, for Azure resources to audit and also remove unnecessary role assignments that is similar to the process described in the previous slide for the Entra role. So it's very important. The two is actually very similar. What you can do for the Entra role, you can also do for the Azure subscriptions and the Azure resources. Now, how do you decide which role assignment should be protected by PIM? How do you decide? I remember one of my projects I worked on last year was an identity governance project. Now, it got to a point in the project that as an architect, I needed to decide that, okay, what are some of the things, what are some of the roles that I need to assign, I need to ensure that PIM is actually protecting. So this is not, it's not a cast in stone. is based on your organization requirements. So after you have done what I mentioned in the last 2 slides, after cleaning up the privilege roles assignments in your organization, you will need to decide which role to protect with PIN. Now, if a role is protected by PIN, eligible users assigned to it must elevate to use the privilege granted by the role. Meaning that a user can be assigned a role through PIN and not know that, user is assigned a role through PIN. And say, I can't see the subscription, or I can, but because user has not actually elevated meaning you've not activated the role to use the role. And the elevation process might also include obtaining approval or using multi-factor authentication, and also providing reasons why you're activating it. So it could be 1, it could be 2, it could even be all of them. It could be any 2, it could be all the 3. So depending on the role that you want to activate, and depending on the policy that has been configured by the administrator, that if this role is going to be activated, for example, now somebody wants to activate the global admin role. So we expect 3 things to happen. We expect that before a global administrator role can be activated, first of all, there must be approval, meaning that another global admin in the tenant must activate, must actually approve the activation of the role. Also, the credential, the account that the user is trying to use to activate the role, there must be MFA configured already. And the reason for activating that role must also be provided. These are for audit purposes, to mitigate risks and audits, such a way that at the end of the day, if the auditor is going to check, okay, why was this role activated, they'll be able to see that, okay, there's a reason for why the role was being activated. And PIM can also track elevations through notifications and also through the PIM or the Entra ID audit logs or the events logs. So you can also track those elevations also through those notifications. Then choosing which role to protect with PIM can be difficult, right? And like I mentioned earlier, it's not cast in stone. It will be different for each organization. So what are some of the best practices that has been provided by Microsoft to actually, to check which resources or which Entra role do I need to actually be protected by PIN? Let's look into it. So from Microsoft side of things, they did the research based on usage pattern. So it is important to actually, prioritize protecting your Microsoft Entra role. So based on usage pattern among users, Microsoft customers, right, that are using PIN, the top 10 Microsoft Entra role that are managed by PIN are this. So based on the usage pattern, the global admin is the most important one, followed by the security administrator, user administrator, exchange admin, SharePoint admin. So this is based on their usage pattern. Microsoft look at all the customers that are using PIN and they check, okay, which customers are using PIN. So these are the rules. But for me, when I was deciding then for my project thing, I decided based on looking at privilege roles. Which role has Microsoft consider as a privilege role? 1 second, let me bring up something. Let me go into the tenant and bring up and shows what I mean by privilege role. So these are top 10 roles anyway from Microsoft's side of things. And another thing that's it's very important is that you must consider the most sensitive data and the most important permission for your organization. For example, now, some organization, they want to protect, like on this list now, you don't see Power BI administrator role there listed or the Microsoft Teams listed here. But some organization, maybe their most important data, right, is in Power BI, or they've created a kind of an automation with Teams, right? So for them, so since those organizations, right, they assess data, and also their core workflows is between Power BI and Teams. They want to add Power BI administrator and Teams administrator to this list. So that's why I say it's not a cast in stone. Then if you also look at this list, you also see this role called security reader. Now, reader roles such as maybe a directory reader or message center reader or security reader, sometimes some organizations consider them as they are less important than other roles. Because why? They don't have a write permission. It's just a read permission. But however, what happens is that some customers, some organization who also protect, they also protect this role because if a bad actor and an attacker, gain access to those accounts with all this reader role, they'll be able to read sensitive data, which include personal data. So they have to take that risk into consideration when deciding whether they need to add the security reader role or any other reader role, even though those reader roles does not have a write permission. I'm waiting for my tenant to come up 1 second. So if I go to Entra ID portal, and I go to roles and administrators. Now, one thing Microsoft has done on this portal is that they've listed some roles as privilege. So you can see this role, any role that Microsoft has listed, they are privileged roles. So there are a lot of them that are privileged roles. So as part of the solution I was building, I listed this as, so I look at, okay, which are all these rules that organizations usually use? And Microsoft has said they are privileged. So those are the ones I considered as part of my solutions. And of course, if maybe Power BI, for example, now, the organizations I'm working with or I want to work with, they use a Power BI or Power Platform and they have a lot of data. I can say, okay, even though Microsoft has not listed these as a privilege, I can say, okay, because most of our developers are using Power Platforms, right? I want to ensure that the Power Platform administrator role is also, protected by PIN. I can say, okay, we have a lot of documents in our SharePoint. Even though the SharePoint is not listed as a privilege role, I can say, oh, I need to protect SharePoint administrator. So, like I mentioned, it's not cast in stone. There are a lot of rules that are available here. So from this rule, based on your company's requirements, your organization requirement, you can say, okay, these are the rules I want team to protect. Can I protect all the rules? Yes, but that'll be a lot of work. But you can pick top 10, you can pick top 20 that, okay, these top 20 rules are very important for us as an organization. And these rules, I want PIN to protect such rules. Please, if you have questions, you can drop them in the chats. I will definitely attend to them in the chats as well. All right, let's continue. So these are for Entra rule. What happened in case of Azure rules? I believe by now we know that Entra rules and Azure rules are different. Are we aware? If you're aware, you can just drop that in the chat. That Entra rule and Azure rules are different. They are two different things entirely. In Entra, those are the ones I've shown you. Azure rules are entirely different things. Now, when deciding which rule assignments to be managed by PIN for your Azure resources, you must first of all identify the subscriptions or the resources that are most vital for your organization. What are the subscriptions or what are the resources that are most vital for us as an organization? Then you are looking at two things. First of all, the resources that are hosted in the most sensitive data. Those resources that host the most sensitive data. Like for example, now maybe you have some Azure storage, right? or some virtual machines that host some sensitive organization data. So you consider them and say, oh, for these resources, I need to guide them by PIN. Then also, resources that are core customer facing application depend on. So if you're an organization and you have some core customer facing applications, those resources are also very important for you to protect by PIN, because if anything happened to those resources, there's a bad actor was able to gain access into your core customer facing applications, then it's going to disrupt your operation as an organization. Again, if you're a global administrator and you're having trouble deciding which subscriptions or which resources are most important, one of the things you can do is that you can simply contact the owner of those subscriptions in your organization. It can be very crazy. I remember I joined an organization, the moment they gave me my global admin account, I just signed into the Azure portal. I saw over 20 subscriptions. I went into the resource group. I saw a lot of resource groups. And in those resource groups, there are a lot of resources there. They are not my resources. Most of those resources are owned by our DevOps guys, our SRE guys, our developers, right? So for me to be able to protect those resources for them, I needed to collaborate with the resource owner, with the subscription owner to say, okay, these are your resources. What are the data that are there? Oh, these are customer data. Okay, we need to protect it. Oh, these resources has PII data. Oh, we need to protect it. So it's very important. You work with the subscription owner or the resource owner to gather a list of all the resources that are managed by each of those subscriptions. Then you work with those subscription owners or the resources owner to group those resources based on severity levels in the case they are compromised. So severity level means that, okay, this is low, this is medium, this is high priority resources. So you have to prioritize managing those resources based on those severity level. And one thing Microsoft recommend is that as you work with those subscription or resource owner for those critical service, right, you need to set up a PIM workflow for all those rules inside those sensitive subscriptions or those sensitive resources. Because again, the PIM for Azure resources supports a time-bound service account, meaning you should treat every service account exactly as you would treat a regular user account. And for subscription and resources that are not critical, you don't need to set up PIM for them, for all their roles. However, you still need to protect any resource owner, any resource that has an owner, and also a user access administrator role with PIM. So far, a resource owner has a owner role or a user access administrator role. You must protect it because Microsoft recommend that you need to manage all owners' roles as well as a user administrative roles for all subscriptions and for all resources using PIM. So it's very important. Those are very important things. So again, resources that has your most important sensitive data and resources that are your core customer facing application depend on. Now, in some scenarios, we need to decide whether to use a group to assign the roles. Sometimes now, maybe you have like 20 DevOps guys that you need to assign roles for. There are a lot of things. So instead of doing an individual assignment, so whenever you need to assign a role to a group instead of to an individual users, you need to consider assigning the role to a group instead of to those individual, meaning that you can create a role assignable group and those users will be added to that group. For example, now, let's say you have 10 junior system admin managing your multi-functional organization or multinational organization, as the case may be, right? You know that all those junior administrators, they need the same roles. Instead of you assigning those roles through team to them individually, what you do is that you create a group for them. You add them to those groups. So at that point, you need to add that PIM role to that group, and the users will automatically inherit the roles. So how do you decide whether to use a group to assign a role? First of all, how many users are you assigning the role to? I mean, if the users are more than maybe 5, at that point you should use group. You don't have to assign them individually. Meaning that a user joined the organization, the user should be added to the group. Automatically, the user will inherit the role. And in a scenario where you want to delegate assigning the role, you want to delegate it, you can also use that as well. So when you have a scenario where many users are assigned to a role, meaning that you want to manually keep track record of who is assigning to a role, or you want to manage the assignment based on when they need it. That can take time for individual. So to assign a group to a role first, you create a role assignable group, and then assign the group to an eligible for a role. So what happens is that the action subjects everyone in that group to the same activation process as individuals who are eligible to elevate into the role. So for group members, they activate their role individually. Even though the PIM is assigned to the group, they will be able to activate the role individually. Now, for you want to delegate assigning of a role. So a group owner can also manage membership of a group. For example, now for an Entra ID role assignable group, only the privileged role administrator, the global administrator, and the group owner can manage the group membership. So when an admin add a new member to the group, the member can get access to the resources to which the group is assigned, whether the assignment is eligible or the assignment is active. You're going to talk about those two different things. When is an assignment eligible and when is an assignment active? So you use the group owner to delegate the management of group membership for an assigned role to reduce the breadth of the privilege that are required. Now, another thing we need to decide as an administrator, we need to decide which role assignment should be permanent or eligible. What is permanent? What is eligible? Permanent means that when you assign a role, the user does not need to go and activate the role again. While for eligible role, the user will still need to proceed to go and activate the role. Now, once you decide the list of the roles to be managed by PIM, maybe from the Entra ID side or from the Azure side, right? You must decide which user should get eligible role or a permanently active role. Now, for a permanently active role, like I mentioned earlier, they are like the normal roles that you assign through your Microsoft Entra ID or through your Azure resources. While the eligible roles are the ones you assign through the PIN. So for example, now, if I go back to my Entra ID portal I showed us earlier. So let's say I want to assign a user an application role, for example, now. So for this user, all I just need to do is to click on Add Assignment, then search for the user and assign the role to the user or to the group. That's a permanent assignment. Why for if I want a situation whereby I want users to activate the role before using the role, the permanently assigned role means that the user can use the role anytime. Why for eligible role, the user will need to go through PIN to activate the role to be able to use the role. So one of the things Microsoft recommends is that you have 0 permanently active assignment for both your Entra role and your Azure role, other than you have what we call the break fix account, the break glass emergency account, right? So even though Microsoft recommend 0 standing administrator, it is actually difficult for organizations to achieve it. Why? Because there are things to consider. The first one, the frequency of activation. So in a scenario whereby a user only needs the privilege assignment once, they shouldn't have a permanent assignment. Meaning that for these users, you have to use PIM for them to activate through. They should not have a permanent assignment. On the other hand, if the user needs the role for their day-to-day job, this is something that the user will be using daily. So if you are going to be using PIM at that point, PIM will reduce your productivity. For those roles, you can consider a permanent assignment role. Then the other use case is a case specific to your organization. So if the person being given the eligible role is from a distant team or maybe an high-ranking executive, maybe it's the CIO or the CTO, that doesn't necessarily, use this role on a day-to-day basis, right? For this person, you can consider them for permanent role. Maybe it's going to affect, right, their productivity. So for them, maybe they need to enforce the deliberation process is difficult for them. All this executive, maybe a CIO, for example, or the CFO, that might not be technical enough. For those ones too, you can consider them for a permanent role. Again, Microsoft recommend that you set up a recurring access review for users with permanent role assignment. So you don't say, okay, I've assigned this role for those users and leave the users to be using the role. You want to check access review to see, okay, these users, are they still using these roles actively? Right? Are they still using this role actively? So it's very important that. Now let's check our PIN settings. Now for PIN, it has a lot of settings. It's not something that we don't have time for that, but I'll show us. So it has the settings for role, a requirement, if you're going to see them in the demo, notification, incident tickets, require approver, activation duration, permanent admin, active expiration, then eligible expiration. For example, now the role here simply means that the name of the role that you are defining the setting for, a global admin, user administrator, or what have you. Then require MFA or two-step verification here talks about whether the eligible for the user to be able to use that role, right? They need to enable MFA. And again, Microsoft recommend that you enforce MFA for all administrator role, especially. Then for notification, your notification talks about if the notification is set to true, it means that a user who is a global admin, a privileged role administrator, or a security role administrator in organization will receive an email notifications when an eligible user activities role has actually happened. Then for incident ticket here, so you want to check whether the eligible role need to record an incident ticket number when activating their role. Maybe a user need to activate a sensitive role, like the global administrator role. For such users, they need tickets. So they need to record their ticket ID, to be able to activate the role. Then this one that says require approvers now. So this one, the settings is talking about whether the eligible user needs to get an approval before the activation is. So the person has tried to activate the role, but they need an approver. Another global admin needs to approve. That's what the approver is talking about. Then the approver, as the name implies, this one is talking about if the approver is required to activate the eligible role, then what are the list of people that should approve the request? So you can set those approver. Then activation duration is talking about the length of time a user will be activated in the role before it will expire. Then for permanent admins, you're talking about a list of users who will be a permanent administrator for the role, meaning that those users, they don't need to activate the roles at all. Again, I mentioned that Microsoft recommend that you have a zero standing administrator role, except for global administrator role. Then if you talk about the active admins, so for Azure resources, the active administrators is a list of users who will never need to activate the roles to use the role. And this list is not referred to as permanent administrator, like the Microsoft Entra role, because you can set an expiration time for when a user will lose their role. Then the active expiration is talking about for active role assignments, for example, for Azure role. Maybe you want the role to expire maybe after 30 days, after 15 days, after 3 months, after 6 months, or a permanent active. Then the eligible expiration talks about for Azure role, for example, now, when will the role expire after the duration? So you can set the same time. So active expiration means that it's active. Eligible expiration, when it's going to expire. All right, let's look at some demo quickly before we continue. Let's look at some demo. So for this demonstrations, we'll look at how do you configure PIN for Microsoft Entra roles. We look at how to assign Entra role PIN, how to activate your Entra role, how to configure PIN for Azure resources, how to assign Azure role in PIN, how to update or remove an existing resource role, configure role for access group, and also analyze PIN. All right, let me bring up my browser so we can quickly look into this demo. All right, so if you remember, I mentioned something, I mentioned the license requirement. What is the license requirement to use PIN? Can anyone drop it in the chat for me? What is the license requirement to use PIN?
P2.
Entra ID P2 license, yeah. So on my tenant here, I don't have Entra ID P2 license. Let me show us. If I go to billing, and I go to licensing. So if we check through all this license I have here, I don't have Entra ID P2 license. Thank you very much, Olafemi or E5. But I have Microsoft 365 E5. No Teams without audit conference. Now, Entra ID P2 license is part of this license. If I click on manage subscription details, for example, here, so this is a trial license anyway. View apps and services included with these subscriptions. Okay, because I can't buy this, but it's actually a part of my benefit as a Microsoft MVP that was given to me. So let me see if I can see it here. Let me search for Microsoft 365 E5. I just want to show us something. Why are you taking time to load? So I just want to show that Entra ID P2 Premium P2 is part of Microsoft 365 E5 because Microsoft 365 E5 is the highest of all Microsoft 365 subscriptions. Is the highest, meaning that it has everything. Everything. So instead of me buying Power BI, buying this, the Microsoft 365 E5 has those resources, those other licenses. I don't know why this is not showing for me. Because I was not paying for this license. I think that's why it's not showing for me. But basically, if you check, or if I go to compare Microsoft 365 Enterprise Plan, is kind of happening. Network is good. Why is it slow? So let me just drop this in the chat. So if you go to compare Microsoft, you're going to see Microsoft 365 E5 listed there. I don't know why it's not, why it's taking time to load. All right. Okay. Still loading. So Office 365 E5 is actually different from Microsoft 365 E5. So go to Microsoft 365 E5, yeah. All right. So this is it. So somebody's going to buy it. This is how much person will be paying per month for it. So if I go down, so it has all the productivity, it has creativity, email and calendar charts. If I go to security, so if you check here, identity and access management with Microsoft Entra ID, P2. So it's part of it. So that's why I don't need to activate Microsoft 365 Entra ID, Microsoft Entra ID P2 license. But for you, you need to come to Marketplace here before you be able to practice on your tenants and type Entra ID P2. Search for it here. So you're going to see there, Entra ID P2. Then just activate the trial here. I'm not going to activate because I already have subscription that can take care of that for me. So that's the first thing you have to do first. Without activating this trial, so just select P2 trial here. And it's going to ask for your credit card or your debit card or so. Then just activate. It's not going to charge you, but you'll be able to use it for 30 days to practice. And I think you can also extend it for another 30 days, right? Well, I'm not going to do anything here. So activate the trial, just click on next here. So it's going to recharge you. That's like showing $0 here for you. So as soon as you have that activated, so just go to your, still on this portal here. I hope we can all get to this portal. I think we should be able to do by now. So you can just type admin.microsoft, type admin.microsoft.com, admin.microsoft.com. It's going to bring you to this portal here. So this portal, click on show all. So under your admin center, you see identity here. So identity is our Entra ID portal. Another way you can get to the Entra ID portal is to go to portal.azure.com. Type portal.azure.com. Sign in with your global admin account. Then click on the hamburger icon here. Look for Microsoft Entra ID here and click on it. So you will still be in the Entra ID portal. So this is also the Entra ID portal, right? Whatever you're doing in one is linking to the other. Now, for us to use PIM, right? So PIM is part of the identity governance solution here. So if we go to identity governance, I think we discussed that. Can you confirm if you've discussed identity governance, entitlement management, access review in your last class? Can you confirm that in the chat for me? Because those are the first things that you need to discuss before you can start discussing PIM, right? So under the identity governance portal here, you will see the PIM, privileged identity management here. So this is our PIM portal. This is our PIM portal. Or if you're in the Azure portal, another way for here, you might not, you're not going to see the identity governance here, but you can just type PIM here in your search bar here. Either you go to through this identity governance, you type identity governance or you type PIM directly to take you here. So just search for, look for PIM here. So you see PIM here. So you're in the PIM portal here. So I'm going to maintain here for now. So I can close this. So this is our pin portal where you can do everything regarding to pin. Now, the first thing we want to do in our demo is to configure pin for Microsoft Entra role. But again, this pin portal here is divided into 3 parts. The first part is a task. The second part is where you do your management, Entra role, groups, and Azure resources. Then the last part is where you do your audit. Now, if we need to configure pin for our Entra role under this manage, but before we do that, let's go to my role here to see. Now, this user that is signing currently, this user, I have eligible, active, and expired assignments. I currently don't have anyone here for expired. The eligible here means that these are roles that I can activate and use. The active assignment roles that this is a permanent role that I have with this my account. I don't need to activate it before using it. Why this expire assignment implies that any role that I was eligible before that became expired. Like if you look at this now, it was configured that this role should expire by June 21st, 2026. Meaning that after this date here, this cloud application security administrator role, and after this date here, this AI administrator role will leave this place. Here will be empty. Then to come to expired assignment here. That's what it means. However, if it is close to this date, maybe a week or some days before this date, if you notice, I have this 2 button, activate but extend is grayed out here. If it is close to this date, I can extend this and the administrator will receive an email that I want to extend this rule. And once an approval has been granted, it will be extended for me. So this is differentiating eligible role and the active role for me. Let me go back. So that is for role. The next task is my request. What do I mean by request? So let me go back to, let me request to activate this role, for example, now. If I'm going to activate this role, I'm going to explain this. I just want to explain those things. Now, you can see that this role, I can activate it for duration for 8 hours here. This can actually be reduced. I can either put the time there or drag this. Okay, I just need this role for 3 hours, for example, now. Then I will now provide my justification, reason. So because the role I want to activate is an AI role, I can say I want to deploy some AI model, some AI model for an AI agent, for example, now. So this become my justification. I can check the roles here. So this give me details of the role. The resource name, which is the Entra ID tenant itself. What is written here? The Entra ID tenant. The role, the person that is trying to activate the role. The start time of the role, when the role was given to me. So I actually configured this since June rather, 2020. And this is when the end is. So I can go for 1 year, basically. So I click on activate here. Now, this is going to go through some stages. It's going to process my request and activate the role. It's going to validate that the activation is successful and it's going to activate this role. The reason why this activated automatically is because the settings I've configured for that role does not require an approval. So hence the role was activated. So if I go to my active assignment now, I will see the role here. The role has been activated for me because I didn't configure that. Okay, before this role can be activated, there should be a global admin, right? And that global admin needs to approve it. So it was automatically activated for me. So how do we configure those things for the Entra role? That's what I want to show us. Now, I mentioned earlier here that my request here will show if somebody has requested to activate a role and I need to approve or deny the request. It's going to show here. I'm going to create a junior admin and I'm going to assign the role based on this use case. So let's configure the Entra role. If you go to the Entra role here, and you go to settings. So I'm going to use a role as an example. So let me pick a random role. Let me pick security administrator here, for example now. So let's say the junior admin I want to assign is a security administrator, for example, part of the security team. So if I click on the security administrator, I will see different settings under different category here. I will see different settings. And this is where I will configure the pin for the settings. Now, if I click on edit here, now earlier, if you notice, I have 8 hours as the maximum activation. I can say that for any user that wants to activate a security administrator role, so any user that I assign a security administrator is eligible, they can only activate it for 4 hours. That is what it's going to show for those users. Then, if they want to activate, should they use Azure MFA? Yes, because this is a privileged role. I can't say none. If I say none here, meaning that any user, even though the user does not have MFA configure, the user can activate the role. And it's not the best practice. It's not a recommended best practice. It's not the recommended best practice. So for this, the user must have an Azure MFA because it's a privileged role. Apart from being a privileged role, all administrative role, even all users should have MFA configure. Why? For additional security. Then maybe my organization is using conditional access. I can select conditional access. But at the moment, I don't have conditional access on this tenant configure. So I'm going to leave it as MFA. Now, earlier when I was demonstrating, I put in a justification that for that AI administrator role, I want to deploy some AI models, right? That's what I put a justification. Where that setting came from is from here. For this role, should they require justification for activation? If they won't require justification for activation, what it means automatically is this. Let me duplicate this and show us. I'm going back to the pin. It's happening. Okay, while that is loading up, let me just go to the other settings. Now, some rules require ticketing information on activations. For example, now, a user wants to activate a global administrator role. For that particular user, we need a ticketing information. That means the user must have raised a support request and has a support request ID. So that support request ID, user will need to put the ID there. Then, this is not common, but for this now, I can say for these users, there must be an approval. That means I want to select other users to approve before that users will receive the activation. So I'm actually combining everything. There are several use cases, but I just want to show us how it's work end to end. So I'm going to select who are the people that will be an approver. So the approver can either be a user or a group of users. So let's say, for example, now I have a group for where all my global admins are. I will just select the group for those global admin, but I don't have a group for global admin. So I'm going to select users. So let me put in my username as an approver. I can actually select multiple people anyway. It could be group, it could be individual. So I'm selecting some specific people as an approver. Is also under global admin. So select. So it means that any user that I assign this role through PIN as eligible, not permanent, at the point of them activating this role, these two users here will receive an email that a particular user is going to activate the security reader role should they approve or deny. So I'm going to update this. So that's everything about assignment for activation. So I'm updating the settings so that we can see everything. Right. I'm going back again to it. Let's look at assignments. I don't know why this portal is so slow. Right. So I duplicated this earlier to show us something. Now, let's say I want to activate this row. That box I click on that says I think I selected the wrong one here. So select security administrator. Security administrator and search. Security administrator. Okay, edit. So that's under activations. Now, in terms of, so this box I selected that require justification of activation. This is a box. If I uncheck this, if for this role, if I go to this cloud app security administrator, for example, now, and I uncheck this functionality that says require justification on app, this box is not going to show for that user. The box is not going to show. That's what I wanted to show us. Now, let's go next to assignments here. Now, for assignments, now you can see it says allow permanent eligible assignments. What this means is that the users is permanently assigned that role. And that is not what we're trying to achieve. The next clause says that allow permanently active assignments, meaning that the users will not even need to use PIN to activate that role. So what we want to do is that we want to uncheck this. And for this, we want to say that after 15 days, this role should expire, meaning that the end time. That's what I'm trying to configure there. That after it should move to expired assignment. That's what the button is saying there. That means after 15 days, if I configure this, after 15 days, it's going to move to expired assignment. Now, allow permanent active assignment means that the user will not need to go through PIN to activate the role. That's what that means. Then this one that says require Azure MFA on active assignment. So I'm going to check this now. So for this now, allow permanent activation. I don't want it to be permanently activated, right? I just want it to be eligible, not active. So I need to uncheck that. Then for this, require Azure multi-factor authentication because it's a privileged role that must be configured. That must be configured for that role, right? Then require justification. I don't want this because I want it to be eligible. Then next is notifications. So there are different things you can configure for this. I'm not going to go into this. Do I want to notify admin, the assignee, the approver? So these are different notifications that you can configure. Let me update this. All right. So we can see just updated today. Was it modified? Yes. So if I clear this out, you'll be able to see these are all the rows I've modified so far. And the last date was modified. The user that modified it, you'll be able to see that information. The rest, you can see that they're saying no because those have not been modified. Now, what I'm going to do next is that let me quickly create the user. Let me call the user security admin. So I'm going to call it security admin. Let me use this domain. No, I don't want this. Don't want this. Let me just use a quick password. I don't need license for this user. Create user without a license. Next. So this user does not have any role. So I've not gone here to select any admin role for this user. So it's just a normal user in the organization, right? So I've not selected any role. Then next, finish adding, close. So let me refresh. Let me go to the Entra and go to users. Let me search for that user, security admin. So this is the user here. If I go into the user, you can see assign role 0. The user has no active role that is assigned. No eligible role assigned. So let's say for this user now, I want to assign read one. Can expired assignment be retrievable? Yes. Unfortunately, I don't have it on my tenant. If you see expired, you see a button that says restore. Or as an admin, you can just reassign the role back to the user. You can just reassign the role back to the user. So the user does not have any active role, no eligible role here. So if I go into PIN and assign the user, I want to assign the user the role. So either I can go through here, assign eligibility. So you can see from here, we have this 3 here. This for rather. Assign, activate, approve, and audit. So assign mean here as a global admin. So this account is a global admin. I can assign roles as a global admin. This means that I can activate any eligible assignments that I have. The same thing I did under here, under my role here. The here means that I can approve the request of the role. We're going to see that shortly. So let me assign that security role that I created. Apologies, the time is really fast spent. I might not be able to finish the demo, but just give us an idea. So I want to assign the security administrator role that I just configured now. This add assignments. Now for this now, it's showing me that the resource is the tenant, right? Why the directory? Source type is a directory. Now the role that I want to assign is a security administrative role, and the scope is to the directory. Why? It's picking it from here. So who do I want to assign this to? So I'm going to assign it to that user that I created, my security administrator that I created, which is this guy here. Then I'm going to click on. I've selected it. Next. Now, I have some other settings that I can configure here. Ideally, already it has told me here that I want the assignment end date to be this. I created the assignment today. It's telling me what I created. So today I created it. Now, this is the end date. I configure 15 days. That issue. Maximum eligible duration is 15 days. So that's why I have 15 days here. I can actually reduce it here because that's the maximum I've configured. If I say active here, automatically, what it means that I, as the administrator, I need to provide that justification. Why do I want to make this role active for this user? Meaning that that user does not need to sign in at all again. That user does not need to activate the role to use that role because the role will be permanently assigned. But what we're demonstrating is eligible. So I just want the role. So the permanent assignment for that role is 15 days, right? I can actually reduce this, but it must be less than 15 days. So let's say I want this user to just have it for till 5th, for example, and I can set the time, but I'm going to leave the time, right? So the user will have it for, so I've set it to 5th of February, meaning that after 5th of February, for this particular user, it's going to expire. So I'm going to assign this. So I've assigned this particular role. So as an administrator, I can see all the users I've assigned to the role, or all the groups I've assigned to this role. Now I want to go and sign in as this user now. So let me copy the user email address. So go and sign in as a user. So I'm going to go in private window. I'm going to go to either use portal.azure.com. Paste user credential. So this might, because I'm signing for the first time, it might ask me to configure MFE. So let me see. So it's asking me to configure MFE. So let me quickly configure that. Give me 1 second to get my phone. 1 second. So it's telling me the first step is to install MFA, but I have it installed already, so I don't need to install, just go to next. So if you have it installed already, just go to your phone and open the application, the Microsoft Authenticator app. Then click on next. So on your app, I think one of my classes have shown us how to use this before. Just scan the QR code. So I'm scanning the QR code now. So once it's scanned this QR code, it's going to add the account and you finish. So you're going to test it out. So we've done the first demo that says configure PIM for your Entra role. So I mentioned once you get your P2 license, then go to your admin.microsoft.com, or you can even get the correct. So you go to entra.microsoft.com and sign in, right, with your account. That's how you configure it. So there are a lot of other configurations that can be done, right? So we've done that demo. Then we've assigned the Microsoft Entra role to a user. So we are going to want to activate now here. We're doing the demo here now to activate the role. I'm trying to see if I can finish these so that I still have a few more slides to teach us some things else. All right, so this has been added. It's telling me to add this. I don't want to do this. Is there a way to skip it? Okay, sorry, let me stop sharing for now. So this is just to add your phone number, basically. So let me quickly stop sharing and quickly do that for security reason. So I've added my number. I'm waiting for a test. Okay, so let me put the code. 333979. Okay. Okay, so phone number has been added. So the reason why it's good, so let me explain this. I explained in one of my classes before why it is good to not just set up your Microsoft Authenticator app and add another alternative. There was a time I changed my phone and I back up my Authenticator app on the phone. So when I import the backup to the new phone, I should be using it directly, but I couldn't use it. So as a result, I could not access all my accounts. I needed to contact Microsoft. They had to transfer the ticket to data protection. So, but if I had my phone number, I've had it as an alternative. I won't need to go through those stress. It took months before they were able to resolve the issue. So I've signed in to this user. So this user now, if you go to Entra ID for this user, you can see that the user cannot create a new user because it's not an admin. Create a new user is grayed out, right? But it can invite external user. Yeah. So let me just show us how to activate so we can see it. So if you type PIN here, yeah. So you can either go through entra.microsoft.com, anyone works. So if I even use entra.microsoft.com, because I'm used to doing it from Azure anyway. But if you use entra.microsoft.com, sign into that user, right? And click on my role here for the user. So we can see that it's showing eligible role here. If you go to active assignments, there is no active assignment and nothing has expired. And how do we activate? So if you check, this is a direct membership. It's telling me something. If you remember during my presentation, I talk about group. So I could give this role through a group to this user. I could give you directly too. So this is direct. So if I created a group, maybe I created a security administrator as a group, then I added users into that group. Then I can also assign the pin through that group too, the same way I did for the user too. So to activate this role, I'll just click on activate. You can see that the end time is this. Let me click on activate. Can someone tell me why this is showing 4? For the other demo I did, it was showing 8. Can someone tell me in the chat? Anyone? Why is it showing 4? If I go to my other accounts, if I go here, let's say I try to activate my own. Although it's already activated. Or is it? This is showing 8 for me. But for this user, it's showing 4. Can someone tell me why it's showing 4 here? Anyone? We have just 20 minutes to go. And I have a lot to cover. Thank you, Bridget. So I configure 4 hours as the maximum time they can use the role. Yes. So it was from my configuration, what I configured. When I was configuring for the role, I went to Entra role, settings, security administrator. So this is why it's showing 4. If I change this to 8 now, it's going to change to 8. Thank you very much for that, Bridget and Emmanuel. Thank you. All right. Now, look at why is it telling me ticketing system? And the other one is telling me, sorry. If I want to activate this is only showing me duration and reason. For the other one, this is showing me ticketing system, ticket number, and this why. Can someone tell me?
Because you ticked it in the box when you were creating it, the PMI.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Because it was based on my configuration. Again, Richard, thank you. So, and I mentioned a specific scenario. If this is going to be configured for a global admin, it is very important you tick that box. These are best practices. I'm telling you, industry best practices. You want to activate a global administrator role, security role, some highly privileged role. Let them create a ticket and they can put the name of the ticketing system. So let's say the ticketing system they're using is a ServiceNow. They're using ServiceNow or ServiceNow or any other ticketing system. Then the ticket number must be there. Let's say this is a ticket number, for example. The reason why this is for auditing. So they can trace out, okay, this role was activated this day. And the person is providing justifications again. I want to check the security configuration of the tenant. So all this information, an auditor will see them when they want to perform an internal audit. So it's 4 hours maximum, meaning that the user can say, okay, I only need it for 2 hours. Everything I'll do within 2 hours should be done. Oh, okay, 3 hours. But it cannot exceed the 4 hours because that was what you've configured. If this is making sense, can I see some reaction? Just use your reaction button so I know you're following me. Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, Kuruma. Thank you, Edward. Thank you, Bridget. Just 4 people are following. Thank you, Felix. All right, awesome. So let's go to the next page. The next thing to do, then click on Activate. Did you notice this? It says what? Your request is pending for what? Approval. Why is it telling me? But when I wanted to activate my own, then I didn't see such error. When I wanted to activate this, I didn't see such error. It just activated for me. So it was still from the same configuration, meaning that somebody needs to approve it. It's not if I click here now, it will not show here because it is not yet active as an assignment. It is not yet active because it's pending approval. So where do I see it? If you remember when I was complaining, said that I put in 2 people as an approver, right, to approve it. So that person will have received an email, or if the person is in the portal, either from the email or from the portal. So let's go there. So this guy is one of the approver. So let me go to his Outlook, his email. Let's see, maybe he has a mail waiting for him. So there's a mail waiting. So this is the mail. This is the mail. It says what? There is a user called security admin that wants to activate a security administrator role. And this is his reason or a reason. This is a ticketing system and this is the request ID. So you as the administrator, now you can go and confirm if this ticket number is existing, number 1, if it has been approved, number 2. These are industry best practice. You go and check the ticketing system. That is this ticket existing and has it been approved? So you check those information. Then you can either click on approve or deny the request. Yeah, this will take you to the Entra portal to approve or deny. So just take it to where you need to approve or deny. But I'll show you in case you don't want to go through the email. So you see it here to approve or deny. So what you just do is you just select it. So you can have multiple here. So either you approve. If the request has not been, maybe this request you check, it has not been approved. You don't approve it yet, you wait for it to approve. But if the request was denied, what you just do is also you deny it here also. But I'm not going to deny, but let me show you how else you can see it. So as the administrator, if you go to my request here, because you will see the requests. Sorry, I think approve request. So yeah. So the other one is the request that's pending. This one here, if you are the one that's initiated that stuff, it's pinged because I can decide to also assign it to this guy too. You will see it, or the other security administrator itself. If I go here, pending request, you see, it's still pending. This person can decide, okay, I don't need it again. Let me cancel. And it will be canceled from the admin side too. So the person is supposed to request it. that is supposed to approve it rather or deny. It will cancel. You can cancel it. So if it has been approved, or if the person is part of an approver team, it's going to see just like the way this person is seeing. Yeah. Approve request. So this is pending. So it's the same thing, either from here.
Pardon.
Okay, so you just approve. So as an administrator, I want to approve it. You also need to provide your justification. You can just say the ticket raise. That's this ticket that this person raised. The ticket raise was approved by the manager. So you can put the name of the manager that approved it. Sure. So they will know that the reason why you approve this request is because this ticket that was raised has been approved by this person's manager. Then confirm. So all the requests. So that's how you do it. So that's how you have to be. So if this person now goes back and check and refresh, then go to my role here. It no longer is eligible. If it goes to the active assignments, it should also show it there. So it's also there. It has been activated. So meaning that after 2 hours, this will automatically be deactivated. I think it's 4 hours I selected. Based on what the person selected, it will be deactivated. And if you are done doing anything you are doing, you don't want to keep it longer. You don't want to wait for it to automatically deactivate it. You can also deactivate here. Do we have any questions so far? Any question? Any confusion? We have less than 10 minutes and I still have a lot of things. Yeah, Richard, please go ahead and ask a question. Richard Egono, you can ask a question. We are talking on mute in case you're talking. Please, if it is clear so far, can I see some reaction? Can you use the reaction button, please? If it's clear. Thank you, Lovina. Thank you, Mano. Thank you, Chuna.
Mano, it is clear. Absolutely clear.
All right. Thank you so much. So I think we can move on. So we've done this configure, assign, activate. So let's see if you can do this. So for Azure resource is the same thing as what we did for the Entra ID. It's almost the same thing. It's almost the same thing, but I'm going to give us a link for us to go practice. Let me quickly give us a link before I forget. So you can go link on the GitHub. It has a lab there. So we can just go ahead and check for the Azure resource. Because of our time, I have some other things to also show us, but because of our time. Time is fast spent. Or can I take additional time? Let me get from you if I can take additional time. It's actually like a 4 hours topic, to be honest. Okay, I'm not seeing reaction for additional time. So let me just manage my time and we'll call it a day from there. So for Azure resources, just go here to manage. So these are the configuration. These are where you do the configuration also for the Azure resource. You can do it at the management group level, managing your resource. Then this was the, so based on the groups you have here, you can search for group and also configure it, but I'm not going to go into that. So let's check audit history. So the audit history, you can use this audit history to check what has been going on based on P on the tenants. So it tells you the action. This was one I just did now, right? So the audit history can show you all those information. Discover and monitor. So this was the Discover Insights that I mentioned earlier. So it's a new feature from Microsoft, right? So you're able to see, okay, how many people? You have 6 permanent global admin, which is wrong. So I can reduce it. It's give you an insight. So account that are assigned early privilege role, so it gives you some insights there. So you can use that. Then the access review. Like I mentioned, you can create access review for all those permanent activation role. I don't have time for everything, but just to show us. All right, let's go back to the slide. I wanted to show us something else, which is also part of what we need to discuss today. But the link I shared in the chat, you can use it to practice and just play around the PIN portal. It's relatively something that is very straightforward. Now, there's what we call an emergency access account for your Entra tenants. Now, remember, I told you a story that I was locked out of my tenants because all the global admin were on the same phone. Their MFE were on the same phone. And I changed the phone, I back up my authenticator app, and yet. But there's a way to avoid that. That is by creating what we call emergency access accounts. Now, it is important that you prevent being accidentally locked out of your Microsoft Entra ID. Because with Microsoft Entra ID, you can't sign in or activate another user account as an administrator, but you can mitigate the chances of accidental lack of administrative access. So let's say you are the only global admin on the tenant. You forgot your user, your password, or you lost your phone that has authenticator app, or you're in a place there's no network. You can't receive text message as a backup, right? You can't receive text message, or you cannot use your Microsoft Authenticator, or there's no internet. So the workaround is to create and manage what we call emergency access accounts. So with the secret to actually preventing that accidental lockout is to create 2 or more emergency access accounts. What are these accounts? So emergency access accounts are highly privileged and they are not assigned to specific individuals. They are highly privileged. They are not assigned to specific individuals. And they are limited to emergency, or we call them the break glass account scenario, where normal administrative accounts cannot be used. So all the admin in the tenant cannot sign in to activate their PIN or for some reason. So this emergency accounts or the break glass accounts. So Microsoft recommending 2 at least or more accounts. And you don't tie the account to specific users. Very important. And it is recommended that you restrict access to the emergency account itself. Not everybody should have access to it. Very few people should have access to it. And you only use this account only when necessary, meaning that you cannot sign into your tenant with your other account. You cannot perform any other administrative tasks with your other account. So you restrict it only when it is necessary. So why use an emergency access account? Now, organizations might need to use emergency access accounts in the following scenarios. The first one, the user accounts are federated, and federation is currently unavailable because of all cellular networks is bad or an identity provider outage. There's an issue with the identity provider. Maybe there's a federated scenarios, and there is a problem with them. Or the administrators are registered through MFA, and all their individual devices are unavailable, or the service is unavailable. Users may be unable to complete MFA to activate the role. Or the person with the most recent global administrator access has left the organization. And Microsoft Entra ID prevent the last global admin account from being deleted, but it doesn't prevent the accounts from being deleted or disabled on premise. So either situation might make organization be unable to recover. Maybe a global admin account from on-prem retired and the person has been disabled from the on-prem, right? So with this situation, you need an emergency account, or there's an unforeseen circumstances such as a natural disaster, then the emergency account is needed, during which a mobile phone or other network are unavailable. So these are some of the scenario where you use the emergency account. And how do you create these accounts? You create the accounts. First of all, it's very important that emergency account should not be associated with any individual users in the organization. And the authentication mechanism for an emergency account should be distinct, should be different. The device or the credential must not expire or be in the scope of automated cleanup due to lack of use. So in a situation whereby an organization, maybe you have some cleanup, you've created a script that any account that is not used for maybe 30 days or 60 days should be automatically deleted. Your emergency account should not fall into that category. And you should make the global administrator role permanent for your emergency access accounts. So these are very, very important. And one important thing is that your emergency account should not be should not be part of an on-prem, should not be created from on-prem like a sync account. I think that's what I mentioned earlier. So exclude at least one account from phone-based multi-factor authentication for those your emergency accounts, or you exclude at least one of those accounts from a conditional access policy. And it's very important that you monitor all the sign-in, audit logs, activities from the emergency accounts. Then you validate the accounts regularly. Again, this is my last point. When you are creating an emergency account, always ensure that the account is created from Office 365, not from your on-prem. Your emergency account should never be created from on-prem. And if you are creating the account should end with this dot on Microsoft domain. Don't use any of the custom domain you have. Use dot on Microsoft domain when you're creating the account. Yes, the account is the same as the break glass account. I mentioned that, yes. Kuruma is your break glass account. So the account should be like this. Now for this tenant, this is my emergency account. In case I'm locked out of this tenant, I've created this account as my emergency account, and the password is very, very difficult because there's no MFA on this account. So to even log into this account, I have to save the password somewhere, not even on my device, somewhere, such a way that if there's a need for me to use this account, because my other global admin, I cannot access it, maybe due to anything, then this account, I'll be able to still gain access to my tenants with this, my emergency account. Sorry, I have to rush because of our time. So if you have questions, this is the time for question and answer. If you have question, there's the time. I don't want us to exceed the time. Yes, you can save the credential in the vault. That's correct. Kuruma, yes. Any question? Yes, Richard, your question, please. Your question? Go ahead, unmute yourself, ask your question, Richard. Sorry that I have to rush this session. Richard, you're talking on mute in case you're talking. You're talking on mute in case you're talking. So the
Yeah,
link,
sorry, can you hear me?
yes,
Can
loud
you?
and clear.
Yeah, thank you very much. In fact, you did a very nice job. The question I have is that, is there any way you can configure something like sequential approval? That is, you need more than one person to approve a request. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for that. So like you're talking about first stage approval, second stage approval. Let's say one particular
Yes,
admin,
yes,
one
yes.
admin, the first stage is not available. So what PIM has done is that so it's actually quite different from entitlement management. Entitlement management has multiple stage approval. If you remember, when I was configuring the PIM, let me go back here. When I was configuring the PIM, so it gives the opportunity to have multiple approvers, but it's not sequential. So let's say, for example, now let's say user administrator, for example, I want to change the settings. If you see, so for here, it provides, if you go to edit now, it just provides a list of all the approver. That is what is happening here. So you can add multiple people to approve. It can even be group to approve, but there's no maybe first stage approval or second stage approval. Just one person need to approve. Hope that answered the question.
Yes, thank you. It's clear. Thank you.
You're welcome. Guys, any other question? You can ask a question. Any other question? Any other questions, guys? For call it today, and it has been a lot of information. So if you're doing those demo, if you have questions, you can always drop them in the chat. I wish I had time to do more demo, but it's basically the same thing. Just go into the settings, configure what you want, and based on your organization use case. Do we have questions? I'm not seeing any hand. Yeah, Lavina, you have question. Go ahead.
When you are talking about emergency account, you said they should not be corrected on prime or through.
Sorry, can you go back again? I can hear you clearly. Can you go back again?
Okay, I said when you're talking about the emergency account,
Yep.
you said they must not be created
On premise.
on-prem.
Yes, those are best. So those are best practice. So let me go back to my tenant right now. So if you want to, there are ways. I think one of our mentors, Oyimafu, showed us for when we are discussing hybrid. You can create an account on the Active Directory domain controller, and it will sync to the cloud.
Yeah.
I think Oyimafu taught us that. I remember that session. We don't recommend that way. Any break-lab account, the best practice is that create it from here from here, Microsoft 365. And you don't even need to even name it break glass. That's another thing. Don't name it break glass. You can just give it a random name. You can even give the name of your team, maybe IT. But if you're going to use the domain, so this is not best practice, but let me just so you know it's a break glass account, break glass. So it has to be this dot on Microsoft. It shouldn't be any of this domain that you have. It must be the dot on Microsoft's domain. I have to create a very long, strong password because this account, at least, you're creating at least two. One of them should be exempted from multi-factor authentication, meaning that you configure MFA, and meaning that you only have one level of security for that account, which is password. That's why the password must be very, very strong. It can even be 1,000 characters. You understand? Even 1,000 characters because it must be strong. Because if they break into the accounts, the bad actor break into the accounts, that means they can do anything on your tenant. Does that make sense? Yeah, Corona, I know it's a lot of information. This is actually like a 4 hours class if I want to teach it, but I had to just squeeze it into 2 hours. Yes, any other question? Lavina, does that answer your question?
Yes, yes.
All right, so these are industry-based practices.
You create it just like normal by creating user or
Yes, but what is important is that use the dot on Microsoft. Use the dot, then password should be very strong. Then these accounts must be exempted from MFA and conditional access. I believe we taught conditional access one of the class. Do you remember? So if you let's say you have an Entra ID conditional access policy, right, that you've created. So if you have created any policy, there must be an exemption. The account should be added to come here, user agent, exclude. So the account must be added here as exclude. To come to users, so you just put that account, like that my admin account now. This is my admin account now. Admin B have a conditional access. I must exclude it. So that means that policy will not affect that account. The policy will not affect the account. Here, Richard, go ahead.
Thank you very much, our teacher for today. Please, if you get access through Break Glass account, can you still elevate yourself to maybe a global admin or something?
So the
Is there
purpose of
any
it,
way you elevate yourself, or you remain as ordinary user into the tenants?
so the break glass account is for
I don't think
emergency
I see my
purposes.
question.
Yeah, I do. So it's for
Okay.
emergency situation in which maybe you have issue with your own account, right? You have issue with your own account in the sense that maybe your MFA at that point is not working, your phone, you're in a place there's no phone network, you understand? And you can't sign in, you need to perform some administrative tasks, right? So the break glass is strictly for emergency situation. Maybe you cannot perform administrative accounts with your own account for some reasons. You forgot your password, your authenticator is not working, or Microsoft is having a service incident in which MFA is not working globally, something like that. So you can use the break glass account for that scenario, just for emergency.
Okay,
Guys,
thank you.
you're welcome. Any other questions, guys? Again, I have to apologize that I had to rush the class.
I'm trying to figure out if this break glass account is like every user should have, or is it only global admin? I'm just trying to understand
So it is only for admin in the organization, right? Let's say you guys are like 5 admin in your organization. You create break glass accounts, maybe 2 of them. And those accounts, few people should have access to it. Few people, maybe 1 or 2 persons in the organization should have access to that account. The username and the password. So it's not as if every user in the organization will create a break glass account. No, they are not admin. It's the admin that is managing the tenant that needs a break glass account as an emergency account. Does that make sense?
yes. Yeah, understand. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. So again, I mentioned that for your break glass accounts, make the global admin role permanent. So when we're doing that settings for the break glass account, it should be permanent. Assign the global admin role to that account through PIN, but it should be permanent. That's what I mean. So if I go here, go back to PIN. So let's say the intro role. I want to assign role. So the global admin role, I want to assign to my break class account, for example. So I can just search for that account here. The guy already has a global admin through a direct way, so there's no need to even assign it, but it is permanent for the user. Yep. Any other question? Yes, Emmanuel. The breaker must have a global admin account. Yes, it must be global admin. That's a super admin. That's a super admin. Any other question, please? All right, so we are 15 minutes above our time already. So I want to appreciate everyone for joining the session. There's another session tomorrow. Should be like the last technical session. Then we'll have an Ask Me Anything session as part of our calendar, in which most of our mentors that are available will join the session and you can ask anything. I think there's also a recap session too before the Ask Me Anything, but our organizer, Emmanuel, will let us know how the session is going to be. So the last session for ASIC 300 is to monitor and maintain Microsoft Entra tenants, which one of our mentor will take tomorrow. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful